Now, the case that has been captivating the nation is the trial of Sean Puff Daddy P. Diddy Combs. A New York jury in the Diddy trial reviewed text messages today submitted as evidence by prosecutors. In the messages, Cassie Vanour told Sean Combs on May 2nd, 2017, "I didn't deserve to be beaten by you. That's not love, that's possession." And as a result of that, we also saw more messages coming through that refers to a well-known videotape assault that occurred in 2016. Braden Paul, Combs' former personal assistant, also testified that he was there during various drug-fueled incidents with Combs during his employment. Legal analyst Candace Kelly joins us to talk about these recent developments. Attorney Kelly, how are you doing this evening?
I'm good. Good to see you, Robert.
Thank you so much for joining us. So, as I said, I have not seen 1 second of this trial. Catch us up on what's going on.
Well, listen, the prosecution is coming to a close of its case. They're actually going to be resting next week. As you mentioned, there were two witnesses that took the stand today to really close this out. First, we had Brendan Paul. He took the stand today. He has full immunity, by the way. He is the former personal assistant of Sean Combs, was his personal assistant for about 18 months. He made it specifically clear, though, that he is not a drug mule. That's what we've been hearing a lot about Brendan Paul. Many people know his background. He graduated from Syracuse University. He's on the basketball team, obviously a very tall gentleman in court. But one of the things that he talked about was the fact that he was arrested for cocaine possession at the time that Sean Combs was caught in terms of his homes being invaded. He was actually on a private jet with KK. Many people know as Christina Coran. She was the chief of staff for Sean Combs. And he said that they were on their way to the Bahamas when he got busted for cocaine, as he put it. He also said a few other things. He said that his job was a lot of hours, maybe 80 hours a week, that he procured ketamine and ecstasy, Adderall for Sean Combs. But again, he emphasized that he was not a drug mule. And he also said that he did not witness criminal activity on these freakoffs, or what many people now know as King Nights. Also testifying, as you mentioned, was a Homeland Security agent. This was a man who took us through more texts, more financial records, hotel reports that were tied to Combs. He talked about large stacks of money that would be moved based on the text, asking for $10,000 or $3,500, or we need $600 right now at this very instant. And then there was a damage report from a hotel in London that he testified. And he testified about how the towels appear to be soaked in baby oil. Now, a lot of people have a problem with this whole baby oil. Like, who cares is what a lot of people are asking me. If there's baby oil, if there's Astroglide, that's his personal preference. Well, one of the things that the prosecution is trying to do is say that every time that there is baby oil, that this signifies a forced freak-off. That freak-off, this is the connection that they want the jurors to make. So this is why they mention the baby oil so much. It's not because of his sexual preferences or what he does in the bedroom. The prosecution is saying, listen, every time you hear about a lot of baby oil, that means that was a freak-off. And they also want jurors to associate that freak-off to something being forced. Now, as a reminder to some people who may not be following the case like you, we've been seeing, actually in the gallery, I have not been seeing anything, but the jurors have been seeing pictures. But this week, they finally saw what in totality was about 20 minutes of moving video of these freak-offs. And, you could kind of see over the shoulders of Sean Combs and the attorneys that were involved what was on that. And then I will say that it was quite a showing looking at these freak-offs. Now, listen, these freak-offs could work for the prosecution and the defense. The prosecution wants to make the point that these were forced. The defense wants to show that, listen, she was enjoying herself and was enthusiastic on these recordings. So this is something that will be left up to the jury to decide. On defense, I just want to make sure that I point out that Brendan Paul said he was not at any freak-off, so that Sean Combs' attorneys wanted to make sure that that was known, that he didn't see any criminal activity. He couldn't have if there was any potential criminal activity because he was not at the freak-offs. They also insinuated that maybe these drugs made Sean Combs a slight more creative, and it wasn't because he was running some huge enterprise. And they also brought up the fact that, Brendan really learned from his experience, that he admired Sean Combs, and this was something that was a big deal. As I said, next week on Monday, the prosecution will rest. The defense has said that they will only take a couple of days and that they will be finished with all of their witnesses by Wednesday, a lot sooner, Robert, than a lot of us had expected.
Well, and on that point, I've done RICO cases in the past. We've seen high-profile RICO cases in recent years, whether it's the YSL trial in Georgia, the Trump RICO case. It's generally seems recently difficult to prove. Can you kind of, for the audience, tie together how exactly the evidence presented today in court ties to the kind of the macro point the prosecutors are trying to make? Because I've noticed a lot of the online discourse, people not understanding exactly what this has to do with proving the conspiracy or the charges that Diddy is accused of.
Yeah, and you make a very good point that a lot of people don't understand because there's a real disconnection. When we think about RICO, we have been trained by the media and movies to think about mafia. And people don't think about Sean Combs in that way. They don't think that he is the mob. But when we talk about RICO, we are talking about committing two predicate acts, one of them perhaps being arson or obstruction of justice, or perhaps bribery or extortion. If he has committed two of those acts over a period of 10 years, then that would lead the jury, if they follow the jury instructions as they should, to say, yes, this RICO charge should actually stick. So that's really the key there, is kind of thinking about it outside of Scarface and Goodfellas, and think of it in the way that it has been used, as you said, over the years. I mean, Adidas has found themselves in the middle of a RICO case. Of course, R. Kelly. Remember the college admissions school scandal? That was a RICO case that crossed state lines with about 54 defendants. So the RICO case is used a little bit more than people probably understand, but the way that we see it in larger than life is with the mob. Though I will say this, Robert, that there are many times during this trial, sitting in the gallery, where things that are alleged that Sean Combs has done are very mob-like. I mean, when we talk about extortion and Regina Ventura, who is Cassie's mother, saying he demanded $20,000 from me, and I went and I took out a second loan on my home, and I gave him that $20,000 because he said he would release the tapes. Or we heard from one of his workers of several years that he's known for a couple of decades, saying that she was forced into a building, abandoned, and set in the room with a large man who was chain smoking and drinking coffee all day. And for 5 days went through lie detector tests, and nobody knew where she was. And she was threatened that her body would be found in the East River. So a lot of these things are very much aligned with what we think about with the mafia. But we really have to think, will the jury think that this company, all these companies that Sean had, was it in the existence just to kind of carry out these acts? I will say that's a hard one for me to connect to. He had Sean John. He had, the liquor deals. He had his music company, of course. He has marketing company. He had Revolt TV. Did all of this exist just for the purposes of criminal activity? That's not one that ties up into a pretty bow, Robert.
And on that point, I think many people, this is part of what you do when you're trying to appeal to a jury, making sure that when you're presenting the case, that you're ensuring that you're not getting lost in the weeds. Do you think that maybe some of this extra information, some of the extra salacious information, runs the risk of distracting the jury from the point that you were making? Was this an interstate, international criminal enterprise, or are they just showing videos to try to embarrass Mr. Combs and eliciting testimony to make him look bad? You can't convict him of being a bad person. You have to convict him of the actual crimes alleged.
Right. And, I think that when they saw this video for the first time after we're in our 6th week now, they saw it last week for the first time, the moving video. They had seen pictures. I mean, some of them ripped their headphones off. It was just a lot. Is it distracting? I think that it's actually good for the defense in that we've heard it so much, and we've seen, pictures of the Astroglide, just cases of it, a la Costco. And I think it really desensitizes jurors. So in terms of the defense, I think that it works for them, and that they've seen about it so much and heard about it so much that it doesn't affect them so much. Though I will say, when that moving video was shown to them, there were quite a few disturbing looks. there were also quite a few very interested, vested looks in terms of what was going on that video. So I think it could go either side, but I don't think it's necessarily a distraction. I think that we've heard about it enough that it's like a horn on a car alarm that goes off. After a while, you can sleep while the horn's going off. You're kind of immune to it.
All right. Well, before we go, tell people what they need to look out for in the trial. But as you said, the prosecution may be resting as soon as early next week. The defense may conclude their case in chief. What are people going to see over the next week?
Well, over the next week, we're going to see Monday, as you said, the prosecution will probably rest. And then Tuesday and Wednesday, we're going to hear from witnesses from the defense. Obviously, Sean Combs is not actually going to take the witness stand. I mean, we'd need a whole week and a half for that. So we know that since they said that they are only going to need 2 days, they probably have 3 to 4 witnesses. One of them will definitely be a forensic psychologist to talk about Sean Combs and all of his shortcomings, right? We heard about a forensic psychologist on the prosecution side and domestic violence and trauma bonding. Well, on his side, I'm sure that we're going to hear about him being a drug addict, a sex addict. Being bipolar has also been mentioned during this case, that Sean Combs is bipolar. We're going to hear all of that and potentially, Robert, some character witnesses. I'm not sure who these character witnesses would be to make a difference, but that's who the door is open to probably at this point.
All right. Well, thank you so much for keeping us updated. I know a lot of people are really keyed in on this and supportive for people to understand, if nothing else, how exactly these RICO cases work and understanding that you may be part of a criminal enterprise that you have no idea about. So be careful who you're associated with. Thank you so much for everybody. All right. We're going to go to the panel to talk about this with Michael Imhotep, host of the African History Network show out of Detroit, Matt Manning, civil rights attorney out of Corpus Christi, Texas, Dr. Zachary Kirk, educator and content creator out of Atlanta, Georgia. And I'm going to go to you, Attorney Manning, first. What do you think about the testimony, and do you think this actually pushes towards a RICO conviction or a conviction on the charges that actually exist, or is it just salacious detail to muddy his name?
Let me say first, it's a great pleasure to be on with you, Robert. You always do a fantastic job, and Candace as well. So I'm glad to see you both. I read the indictment while you were talking to Candace, and I haven't listened to any of the testimony, obviously not being there, but I'm struggling with how the government is going to make this as well. And let me give you an example. Roland has a bunch of people working for him, right? If they go out and they do something and something happens while they're out, if somebody's prosecuting, there's going to be a question of whether that's done under the aegis of the Roland Martin Unfiltered show, or whether it's done with a group of people who happen to work for Roland Martin. That is the issue in this case. There are a number of people who work for Diddy, and the government has the burden solely on their shoulders to show that all of these activities, these salacious details, as you're saying, inure back to the Combs enterprise. And I think the idea that just because they work for the Combs enterprise, that creates RICO liability just doesn't track. I've never tried a RICO case. I've tried hundreds of cases, never particularly a RICO case. But the way I would attack this is precisely what my understanding Brian Steele is doing, which is, look, he may like to partake in drugs. He may like to do things sexually that are outside of the norm for you. But whether that correlates to a conspiracy under this business enterprise to further its purposes is a difficult thing unless you have very clear evidence that it's done for those purposes. And very quickly, before I turn it over to another panelist, I know the way the government tried to write this indictment was pretty wide-reaching and nebulous, to increase his power, I think is some of the language that it used, to preserve his prestige. But the problem with that is you may have a reasonable doubt if one of the jurors believes that that's something that he's doing in an individual capacity as to Sean Combs, individual from the Combs enterprise. And that could be something that people who are employed for him are helping him do, but not necessarily under the umbrella of the Combs enterprise. And I think that's going to be the struggle. How do you say this is really the business or the association that is conspiring to do these things, as opposed to people with whom he has a close relationship who are doing it at his behest, but maybe not necessarily in the conspiratorial way that is required for necessary proof under this indictment.
Absolutely. And Michael, I want to talk to you and kind of talk about the cultural impact of this Diddy trial, because, as much as you may not want to, if you are going to write the history of hip hop, Sean Diddy Combs is in there for a big period. If you want to play music at a cookout this summer, if you're at the Juneteenth barbecue, it's hard to skip over all the R. Kelly songs, skip over all of the songs involving P. Diddy. What do you think the cultural impact of this trial is going to be?
Well, first of all, kudos to Candace for giving us this breakdown almost every day for the past 6 weeks. I don't know how she can stand this, but when we look at the cultural implications of this, one, even if Diddy is found not guilty, there's going to be, I don't think his image is really going to recover from this, because we saw the abuse in the video that was released when he beat Cassie, and he put out a video apologizing for it also. So that abuse is substantiated. Two, when we hear about the freakoffs and the prostitutes with sexual escorts, etc., things like this, it's one thing in hip hop. Let me put it like this: in hip hop takes everything that's in American culture like to the extreme, right? But what we're finding out about these freak-offs in court, this is beyond the extreme. Okay, so and then when we talk about valuing Black women, valuing African American women, listening to testimony from Cassie, things that we're finding out in this trial, even if he's found not guilty, I would be suspect to really any Black woman that wants to work with Diddy after this.
Absolutely. And Zachary, picking up on that point, I've been looking at a lot of the cultural conversations that we're seeing online, particularly with younger people, Gen Z who didn't grow up with the music of Diddy or other things. And it seems that there's this divide that is taking place between Black men and Black women online when you're discussing this trial. If it seems if you have any questions about it, if you're a man talking about it, you automatically get accused of defending Diddy. And if you're not 100% believing, or if you have any questions about it, you get called misogynist and all the other things. What do you think has to happen for us to be able to have constructive conversations online when we're discussing something as horrible as the Diddy trial, but also trying to be objective in our communities?
We have to understand that the ideas represented by an individual are the ideas represented by the individual. I don't speak for all Black men. I don't speak for all Black gay men. I speak for myself, Dr. Zachary Kirk, the Zactivist. That's who I speak for. And Robert, when, I followed this case. This is kind of the content that I cover on social media. I focus on people, politics, and pop culture. And this has really held the pop culture, in a chokehold, especially among young people. And I think the divide is even bigger than just simply Black men and Black women, but it really is kind of an intergenerational split. And a lot of young people, Gen Z, young Black Gen Z members of the Black community really see this in a very negative light. One thing I realized, I was reflecting on this actually on yesterday when I sat down and read the 46-page, I'll call it a legal claim or complaint against Tyler Perry. The job of a really good prosecution is to create a really strong brief, a really good complaint that, everyone's going to see, the court of public opinion, and rush to judgment. And knowing that most people aren't going to read through it and think critically. That's kind of some of what we maybe saw with the Diddy complaint, what came out, the salaciousness of it. But again, as Attorney Manning, my panel mate said earlier, there is actually a level of nuance here as to what is the real wrongdoing and whether or not the RICO charge will be something that is going to be able to hold. And as I look through this case and I follow it very closely, I can't help but to agree that I think it could be that there is some trouble for the prosecution as this continues to roll out. Listening especially to our expert at the very beginning, I don't know if Brendan Paul's testimony helped or hurt the prosecution's case. I think it could have done a little bit of damage today, even though I haven't watched that piece yet. I'm going to check that out after we conclude. But it didn't make me feel very confident for hearing that, then knowing the other things that have happened throughout the days of this case.
I think it's an interesting conversation. Like you said, following this is very much a generational split and generational divide. And it's something that we have to keep up with because this is part of what the cultural conversation is. And we can't simply ignore it because it's not within your wheelhouse, because it does drive the conversation. All right, we're going to go.
Hello, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase. Listen to what I'm about to tell you. The window to invest in Fanbase is closing. We've raised over $10.6 million of our $17 million goal. That means there's room for less than 6,370 people to invest in Fanbase for the average amount. The minimum to invest in Fanbase right now is $399. That makes you an owner in Fanbase today. Go to startengine.com/fanbase to invest. Why? Because current social apps have taken advantage of users for far too long, with content suppression, shadow banning, harmful racist content, and no real tools for monetization and equity. Fanbase has over 1.4 million users and counting, allowing anyone to reach all their following and monetize their content from day one. Social media is the new TV, and whoever owns the apps that distribute that content have the opportunity to own potential billion-dollar companies. While big platforms with uncertain futures are failing to serve their users, Fanbase is stepping up to fill the gap. Don't wait until it's too late. Invest now, invest for yourself and your future. Go to startengine.com/fanbase and own the next generation of social media.